There are cases that don't just take a life, they expose every crack in the system built to protect it. December 2012, Barrow-in-Furness, a quiet maritime town tucked into the northwest corner of England, the kind of place where neighbors know each other's names, where the rhythm of daily life is slow and predictable, where people believe that safety is simply the air they breathe. It was here, behind the unremarkable front door of an unremarkable house on an unremarkable street, that a 13-month-old girl named Poppy Worthington took her last breath. Poppy, named for a flower that blooms bright and bold. She never got the chance. But here is what separates this case from every other file I have ever opened. It is not the death of Poppy that will stay with you. It is everything that happened after. A father who invoked his right to silence 252 times across 48 hours of interrogation. 2 separate prosecutions that walked in with evidence and walked out with nothing. A crime scene left wide open. Laptops and bed linens, the very DNA of the truth never sent to a laboratory. A child welfare system that looked directly at this family, checked every box, filed every form, and saw absolutely nothing wrong. The machinery designed to protect the most vulnerable human beings on this planet failed, completely, catastrophically, and quietly. What followed shook the British Parliament into an emergency session. It triggered the complete dismantling and federal takeover of an entire social services department. It forced investigators, caseworkers, and doctors to sit in a witness chair and answer for every shadow they let slip through their fingers. The interrogation reports that came out of that inquiry were so damning they were rewritten into the mandatory training manual for every law enforcement precinct across the nation. Poppy Worthington never received criminal justice. No charges were ever filed. No one was ever convicted. But her name, the name of a 13-month-old girl who loved bananas, who gripped her mother's hand in the dark, who watched the world with eyes far too old and far too knowing for her age. Her name is now printed in the training manuals of every police officer and social worker in the United Kingdom. She was denied justice in life, but her legacy rewrote the laws of an entire country. This is not just a case file. This is a mirror held directly up to the face of authority, and the reflection revealed something lethal. From the caseworker to the detective, routine had replaced vigilance, comfort had replaced scrutiny, and it cost a child everything she was ever going to be. So stay locked in. Watch every detail. Because the warning signs were always there. They always are. The sudden withdrawal, the flinching, the dread that has no name. These are not moods. These are alarms, and when we learn to read them, we become the last line of defense that Poppy never had. This is her story. And this is the story of every child the system has not yet failed if we are paying attention.
The illusion
open.
of security surrounding our youth is a fragile thing, and the following investigation exposes the cracks you never noticed. It is an account that leaves a permanent mark on the psyche. December 2012, a quiet British municipality became the epicenter of a legal overhaul that rocked the nation's foundation. The gravity of the situation was such that the British Parliament was forced into an unprecedented emergency recess. Observe every detail until the conclusion, where we will deconstruct the behavioral red flags that often go undetected by the untrained eye. Understanding these patterns is the only way to intercept a similar catastrophe before it strikes again. This briefing serves a single purpose: to give a voice to those small victims who were silenced far too soon. Their stories demand an audience, ensuring their silence is not the final word on their existence. The subject maintains his innocence, claiming total disorientation. This interview represented the final window for Paul to establish his official narrative. Was he reluctant to seize that narrow opening for potential exoneration? He operates strictly under legal counsel, insisting he is the victim of a targeted witch hunt despite his supposed lack of involvement. Paralyzed by indecision, he defers entirely to his siblings' guidance. The atmosphere inside that interrogation room remains a point of interest. His willingness to cooperate was strained. The repetitive nature of the questioning clearly took a heavy psychological toll on his focus. Confronting the specifics of the case, appeared to shatter his composure entirely. Processing clinical brutality regarding one's own child is a visceral experience that few subjects can navigate without breaking. The case of young Poppy carries a staggering weight, yet these specific files are the ones that demand our absolute scrutiny. They fundamentally alter our perception of the societal safety nets we take for granted. Ensure you are monitoring this feed for updates, and log your current location and timestamp in the records below. Tracking the reach of this intelligence is vital. Disseminate this briefing to those committed to the protection of minors. Initiating the deep dive now. Barrow-in-Furness, a maritime outpost in northwest England, defines small-town life where anonymity is rare and the tempo is predictably rhythmic. In these tight-knit sectors, the baseline for communal trust is significantly higher than in urban environments. Yet, it is precisely within this perceived serenity that the most dangerous deceptions can take root. Tucked away on an unremarkable residential block stood the Worthington residence, a structure as nondescript as its neighbors. Paul, his partner, and their offspring followed a standard domestic routine that mirrored every other household in the vicinity. Casual neighborly interactions and routine inspections by welfare services suggested a functional unit. The paperwork was filed, the boxes were checked. The facade of the modern family was perfectly maintained. That optical illusion of safety would ultimately become the most chilling aspect of the entire investigation. On January 5, 2011, the Worthington family welcomed a female infant into their world. They designated her Poppy, a name suggesting vibrancy and life, which seemed appropriate during her initial development. Observations from the mother indicated that the child possessed a presence that exceeded typical neonatal behavior. Her gaze was not merely passive observation of her surroundings. She conducted her own silent surveillance, analyzing every figure with deep, calculating eyes, as if indexing everything she saw. Rest only came when she maintained a physical anchor, gripping her mother's hand for security. During the late-night stillness, the mother felt the entire universe narrow down to the singular, fragile connection of that tiny grasp. After dark, the infant displayed a marked resistance to breaking that physical contact. She remained vigilant, staring into the shadows as though scanning for any nuance in her fresh environment. The local population grew accustomed to the sight of her carriage during regular perimeter walks. She engaged outsiders with a fearless curiosity, her distinctive dimpled expression breaking down the defenses of even the most stoic observers. Her initial medical and developmental profile was flawless, vibrant, and thriving. All indicators pointed toward a successful trajectory. By the 90-day mark, she was already attempting to bridge the communication gap. She produced melodic vocalizations while monitoring the activities of her older siblings. Her tracking of their movements was precise, suggesting a high level of cognitive engagement and a desire for integration. The household often came to a standstill just to observe her. She possessed an innate gravity that seemed to ground the entire family. At the 6-month milestone, her distinct personality was evident. She actively pursued stimuli, grasping at her environment with determined curiosity. Every collapsing block tower triggered her infectious and predictable laughter. Her worn-out teddy bear accompanied her everywhere, its fur thinned by constant, desperate clutching. Neighbors swore her signature dimple stayed visible even while she slept. For Poppy, eating was an investigation. She met every new flavor with suspicion before inevitably surrendering to pure joy. Bananas were her primary target. After feeding, mashed fruit covered her forehead as much as the bowl, amusing the entire family. She'd occupy her high chair in the kitchen corner, hammering a plastic spoon like she was running the entire operation, a vital fixture at every meal. In January 2012, they celebrated her first birthday with a modest cake. The room held that unique atmosphere of warmth found only at a toddler's party. The birthday girl remained oblivious to the milestone's significance, yet the vibrant gift wrap triggered instant, visible delight. She fixated on the crinkling paper, ignoring the gifts, while the adults documented the scene. By then, she was standing independently, clutching the table and staring into the lens with an eerie, knowing focus. She'd react to television theme songs by dancing in her crib the moment a familiar melody played. The introductory notes of "In the Night Garden" elicited the same wide-eyed shock every time, as if the song were a brand new discovery. By the summer of 2012, the subject had become a true explorer. She navigated every room with total confidence, mastering the stairs and testing her mobility against the walls, celebrating every small victory in distance. Her older siblings functioned as her primary handlers and biggest supporters. They'd sit together, building wooden structures just for her to dismantle, validating her with immediate applause. A nearby park served as her primary outdoor testing ground several times a week. She'd track birds for long stretches, mimicking their vocalizations while pointing toward the sky. Her mother would observe quietly, trying to commit the peaceful imagery to permanent memory. The damp grass, the shifting leaves, and the birds perched in the canopy. To Poppy, this was real magic, a fresh revelation at every single outing. When autumn chilled the air and light faded, her disposition remained unaffected. Wrapped in thick sweaters and wool hats, her appearance forced every passing neighbor to stop and acknowledge her. At 13 months, she was the picture of perfect childhood development, inquisitive, vibrant, and utterly captivated by the world around her. December brought a freezing bay wind to Barrow-in-Furness, and festive lights appeared in windows. Her reaction to the holiday environment was typical for her age group. She grabbed at every glowing garland, transfixed by the illuminated tree, her eyes reflecting the artificial shimmer of the season's colors. This was her first legitimate Christmas, the first she was capable of processing. Her siblings hovered over her, explaining the rituals and ornaments while feeding off her fascination. In those final days, no red flags were visible. Domestic life appeared standard. Brief sightings of Poppy in the window suggested a status quo of normalcy. Witnesses from those final hours remember a cheerful girl with a dimple, playing on the floor with infectious laughter. Nothing suggested the clock was running out on her life or that those flickering lights would be the final Christmas she would ever see. Between December 11th and 12th, the house fell into a winter silence. The mother slept downstairs. Poppy was upstairs in the bedroom of her father, Paul Worthington. That logistical detail would trigger years of forensic scrutiny and questions the justice system cannot answer. If this case weighs on you, archive this record and ensure this narrative reaches those who need to listen. We have reached the critical pivot of this file, the moment where the narrative shifts from tragedy to consequence. This sequence explains how one child's fate managed to dismantle and rebuild the legal infrastructure of an entire nation. Let us proceed. 05:48 hours. An emergency transmission originates from the Worthington residence, breaking the morning silence. Upon arrival, the paramedics bypassed standard operating procedures. They alerted law enforcement before the victim was even stabilized for transport. These were seasoned veterans, individuals whose eyes had seen the darkest corners of human experience over decades of service. Yet, the scene they encountered that morning defied any rational explanation involving illness or simple misfortune. 06:11 hours. Poppy arrives at Furness General Hospital. The trauma team initiates a desperate, high-stakes intervention. They fought to save her for over 60 minutes, but the resulting clinical autopsy left no room for interpretation. The medical findings were absolute, providing a silent testimony that could not be dismissed or explained away. 07:07 hours, December 12, 2012. Subject: Poppy Worthington, pronounced deceased. A 13-month-old girl, who days prior was captivated by the glow of holiday lights, was suddenly and inexplicably gone. Only one adult was present in that house during those final dark hours. Her father, Paul Worthington, offered a void where there should have been answers to the questions haunting the investigators. What exactly transpired behind that bedroom door between a father and his defenseless daughter? Reporting from the field in Cumbria, Paul McNamara delivers the situational analysis on this institutional collapse. Today, authorities escorted him into court, his face hidden beneath a hood to evade the heat of public outrage. Worthington fought to avoid this confrontation. He petitioned for the safety of a remote video feed. Request denied. Instead, he sat behind a tactical screen, shielded from the public gallery. The subsequent revelations would fracture the public trust of the United Kingdom as deeply as the crime itself. Cumbria units responded, but the clock started ticking on a compromised investigation from hour one. Vital evidence was neglected. Protocol was discarded. The crime scene was processed with catastrophic violations, ensuring that the physical history of that night was erased forever. The bureaucracy failed Poppy Worthington for the second and final time. First, by failing to protect her life, and then by failing to secure the truth after she was taken. End of file summary. The conduct of the responding units was nothing short of a professional disgrace. The Independent Police Complaints Commission launched a review, concluding that the operational response was a total systemic failure. Internal findings revealed that the responding officers were fundamentally under-equipped and lacked the specialized training for a case of this magnitude. At the break of dawn this morning, the following update was issued. The Crown Prosecution Service has formally declined to pursue criminal charges regarding the 2012 death of 13-month-old Poppy Worthington. Residual litigation remains active, specifically regarding administrative negligence and the ongoing coronial inquiries. I am now authorized to provide a formal assessment on the handling of this matter. I have scrutinized every report concerning how the Cumbria Constabulary managed the initial breach and subsequent investigation. My conclusion is definitive. The department's tactical and investigative maneuvers fell dangerously short of the professional standards the public and the victim deserved. Judge Peter Jackson would later enter into the official record that a legitimate probe didn't actually begin until 9 months after the event. 9 full months of investigative vacuum. While the physical evidence quietly decayed, the attorney representing Poppy's mother delivered a cutting summary in the courtroom. If this weren't a tragedy, it would be a farce, a comedy of errors. But these weren't simple clerical mistakes. This was a deep-seated failure. Behind the legal jargon was a child with a dimpled smile, and a system that proved itself incapable of delivering her justice. The legal battle for Poppy stretched across years, becoming one of the most labyrinthine sagas in the history of British jurisprudence. The initial inquest in October 2014 was a hollow exercise lasting exactly 7 minutes. No witnesses called, no cause of death established, a procedural failure so severe that the High Court would eventually strike it down. By January of 2016, the narrative reached a breaking point. Judge Peter Jackson issued a landmark family court ruling, concluding that based on the evidence, the father was the party responsible for the night's events. Paul Worthington maintained a total denial, while the case became a chilling symbol of total institutional breakdown. Over 48 hours of intensive questioning, he chose a strategy of absolute non-cooperation. He invoked his right to silence 252 times, breaking it only to describe Poppy as the vibrant, happy soul of the family. Twice, federal prosecutors analyzed the evidence. Twice, they walked away, citing a critical lack of actionable proof. The investigation's golden hours had been bled dry. The damage was irreversible. Securing a criminal conviction had become a statistical impossibility. By late 2017, the second inquest loomed as the final perimeter for the truth. During 3 weeks of hearings, Paul Worthington stood behind a wall of silence, refusing to answer 252 times. The calendar turned to January 2018. An 87-page ruling emerged. The coroner saw the patterns clearly, but without physical proof, he could not legally call it a homicide. Justice for Poppy Worthington remained a ghost. No charges were ever filed. But Paul wasn't the only one under the microscope. A parade of investigators took the stand, forced to answer for the shadows they let slip through their fingers. The interrogations followed a repetitive, agonizing rhythm of negligence. It started with a compromised perimeter, A crime scene left wide open. They abandoned the laptops and the linens, the very DNA of the truth. Crucial samples were never even prioritized for laboratory analysis. There is a dark symmetry here. The system that abandoned her twice was the one she eventually forced to rebuild. The inquiry exposed rot so deep, the department's leadership was purged and the entire organization was audited from the ground up. Federal oversight bodies moved in. They drafted a post-mortem of the investigation, so scathing it became the mandatory field manual for every precinct in the nation. The fallout didn't stop with the badges. The social welfare apparatus found itself in the crosshairs next. Oversight reports labeled their performance a failure, triggering a direct federal takeover of the agency's operations. Strict new operational directives were hard-coded into the protocol for doctors, caseworkers, and the boots on the ground. Now, the moment a red flag appears, a multi-departmental task force is triggered instantly, cutting through the red tape that once choked the life out of a little girl's chances. Her name is now etched into training manuals. Every new recruit and social worker learns the hard lessons of Poppy Worthington. She is the definitive case study on total institutional collapse. Her tragedy didn't stay quiet. It bled into the national conscience. It became the catalyst for legislative shifts that, according to the data, are already saving lives in the field. That girl from Barrow was denied justice in life, yet her legacy rewrote the laws of an entire nation. To my colleague across the aisle, I acknowledge the weight of your inquiry. The gentleman, specifically, has put in the legwork to address the systemic fractures that allowed this horror to take place. His concerns mirror my own recent briefings. I will provide a full, detailed report in writing to address his specific queries. Furthermore, I am requesting a direct sit-down with him. The people in his district deserve more than a memo. They deserve a tactical discussion face-to-face. Before we break down the psychological profile of the fallout, ensure you are locked in for future briefings. If you aren't on the list, rectify that now. The intelligence that follows is vital. Scan our archives. Every file we open reveals a similar pattern of systemic failure and human cost. Information like this is what shifts the needle when a life is on the line. This isn't just a grim family history. It is a mirror held up to the face of authority, forcing it to look. The reflection revealed a lethal apathy. From the caseworker to the detective routine had replaced vigilance, and it cost a child her life. Here is the primary takeaway. Outward calm is not an indicator of security. Danger hides in the margins of a sterile report or behind a tidy front door. It only surfaces when you dig deep enough. Whether you are a guardian, a teacher, or just a witness, remember that behavioral shifts are the loudest alarms. Watch for the sudden withdrawal, the flinching, or a dread that has no name. These aren't just moods. These are tactical warnings. Ignore them, and you might lose the chance to act. In our line of duty, we'd rather chase a false lead than let a shadow slip away. Contacting a hotline is a tactical choice. Staying silent when a life is at risk is a psychological debt. Poppy Worthington's timeline ended at 13 months. Subject showed a deep affinity for park wildlife and simple games, eventually drifting off while anchoring herself to her mother's hand. She represented the ultimate vulnerability, pure curiosity, and a fatal, profound level of trust. Never let this case file sit in an archive. It serves as a cold reminder that protection is our collective moral responsibility, ours to bear